Hello, everybody. It is so nice to see you today. How are you? Welcome to my show. I'm Kathie J, and I'm so happy that I get to hang out with you for a half hour every day. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you ever want more of me, you can always go and follow me on social media. Go to my YouTube channel, Kathie J, subscribe there, like it, and I could be with you 24/7 right there in your pocket. All right, so this week, thank you for hanging out with us. We've been talking about so much. We've been talking about being healthy physically with Dr. Terry. We've been talking about finding the hope within yourself. And we've even talked about happiness. And when you feel happiness, you feel freedom. And it all sounds wonderful. But for many of us, it takes a lot of work and it's still not enough. So we need to go deeper and we need to seek out professional help. The journey's different for everybody. The help to guiding us every day, the guiding light is here. Our counselor and founder, therapist of Color Collaborative, Rossina Schroeer-Santiago. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kathie, for inviting me back. I mean, I just enjoy being here with you.
We love it. We've been very excited. We've been waiting, anticipating for you to come. So thank you for wanting to tackle self-care with us.
Yes.
So let's start with the Therapists of Color Collaborative. What is it and why did you create it?
So the Therapists of Color Collaborative was just kind of my brainchild to create representative spaces, not just for counselors, but also our community, right? We needed a place to receive representative care and see ourselves represented in the space that we're in.
Totally. You wanted therapists that look like you. You want
Absolutely.
that. How many therapists are at your collaborative?
Right now we're tipping over 40 and we're on our way to 50.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yes.
And we'll get into more of it at the end because, you have ways that give people advice on how they can pay for their therapy, and we'll get into that at the end of the show. So,
Absolutely.
But I want to get into self-care right now.
Yes.
You're seeing a high volume of people coming in.
Yes.
Repeaters that are coming back, and then brand new people. What is on everybody's mind?
Yeah, with all of this kind of restoration from coming out of COVID, more in-person things happening, things are opening up, we're still seeing a trend and actually an increased trend of depression, anxiety, social anxiety, right? People are still dealing with a lot of grief and loss.
Yes, right.
And so,
so there's normal stuff that we've all been dealing with, but you say that the added on of just the restlessness of our future, the war
Absolutely.
And the COVID and everything is
the uncertainty of it all,
is
right?
making everything worse.
It's super stressful, and and we're in this state of constantly being like stressed and trying to figure out, like, our body doesn't have the opportunity to just kind of relax and recover and restore.
Right. We don't have our own resources, or we run out of our resources.
Yes.
You were saying we get tested about 50 times a day on our stress levels.
Absolutely, and so kind of what that looks like.
No wonder why we're all exhausted.
I know, like from jumping out of bed, right?
Yeah.
To the kid
Yeah.
to waking up late. My goodness.
Your car not working right. The traffic.
Flat
You're
tire.
Right, you're right.
Traffic, right?
All
of
not
those
having
things.
money for gas. Everything.
Printer at
yes,
work.
Right. All
Your
of
computer
it.
failing. It's all stressful.
I didn't think about that. And it breaks your willpower down all day.
Yeah.
Right? It's chipping away at you all day.
It's putting you in a response. And so we call that, our fight or flight mechanism, right? We're not necessarily fighting anything, but you're ready to run and go do something. So you're constantly stimulated to have to respond to something happening in the world around you.
Exactly. So that's the importance of why we need the self-care.
Absolutely.
Is so we're good when the test comes,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
Now there's a difference between self-care and self-indulgence, right?
Absolutely. So self-care is the things that contribute into our spiritual, our emotional, social, right? And just that part of our well-being. We have another four, which are our personal, like the hobbies we're involved in, our spatial, with the space you exist in, financial, right? And our workspace, right?
Okay.
Like if you don't have, some type of care routine that you're doing in those spaces, it doesn't feel good either.
Okay. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. When we come back, I'm going to get into self-care versus self-indulgence because you said financial. Okay, so we'll be right back.
Yes.
Ramos Law is an official partner of the Kathie J Show. He's a medical doctor and a lawyer. Ramos Law, what makes us different makes us better. Welcome back to the Kathie J Show, everybody. Today we're getting into it. We're talking about self-care and how it goes hand in hand with mental health. So professional licensed counselor Rossina Schroeer-Santiago is here. Yay, thank you for being here. Okay, so when we were last left you, we were talking about self-care.
Yes.
And you said there's 8 pillars in our life that we need to have filled.
Yes.
Kind of like our little Trivial Pursuit pie.
Absolutely.
And you pour stuff into each part. What are the 8?
So the 8 are physical, emotional, social, and oh my gosh, that one skipping me, our spirituality, right? And then we have our professional, which is our workspace, our spatial, our financial, and our personal.
Yeah.
Which are like the hobbies we get into, right?
Okay,
And things
okay,
like that.
all right, hobbies. Okay, so yeah, okay, so that we need all those to be good, and sometimes everything's so bad we don't know how to get there.
Right.
So we need to, the only way to get there is to go back into ourselves, correct?
Yes, yes.
Self-care.
Self-care. So when we're giving into those buckets, what it looks like is if you're doing something for your physical well-being, right? You're going to the gym,
True.
you're eating
You're pouring
well,
into that
right?
part of
You're
your
sleeping good, right? Same thing with spirituality and religiosity, right? Like if you're pouring into like your faith, you're meditating, you're connecting with yourself, you're connecting with meaning and you're finding purpose in your life, right?
Okay.
Like that's giving to you.
That's a little bucket,
right?
okay.
In your space, if your space is cluttered, right? And you're looking all around you, you got a little chaos going on in your mind because it feels so overwhelming. You're looking at the space around you. You don't even know where to begin to clean it up.
And so where do we begin to learn self-care? You said there's 3 things that you need to do over and over again for self-care.
Absolutely. The first thing you do when you're looking at self-care is you set an intention.
Okay, like I'm going to clean the clutter.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you don't make it so big, right? So if the clutter is like your whole house and say it's somebody who's been hoarding, you don't want to go out there and say, I'm going to clean my house and expect it to be done in one day.
Start in one area.
You start in one area, you set a timer, right? Make it really practical and tangible.
Okay, intentional.
Okay. The second part is taking action, right? Like actually saying, I'm going to go after, I'm going to do it.
You got to walk over to the pile and pick it up and start moving stuff.
You can't just expect it to do it by itself.
I've tried that. It doesn't work. Yeah.
And I like to say it's not an easy bake oven. So I might be dating myself, right? But like that easy bake oven, you set it for that timer and forget about it.
Right.
That's not what self-care is. You actually have to be active in what you're doing to pour into your buckets.
Do the work. Okay.
Do the work.
So intentional action. What's the last one?
And then consistency.
You mean I always have to eat right?
Yes. You can't just eat right for the one day, right?
Okay.
And if you're just doing one thing one time and expecting a miracle to happen, right? Then don't be disappointed because it's not going to happen.
I reward myself usually after a couple times. I'm I did it.
Yes. It's okay. I have a client that calls them Insta-treats. Insta-treats are super okay.
Yeah, for sure.
It's okay because the thing when you're setting goals for yourself, this goes into SMART goals too. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound.
Right.
So it's okay to have a little Insta-treat at the end of that too.
Okay, but where does that Insta-treat to me sounds like indulgence.
It can be.
So where's self-indulgence and self-care?
That's the perfect line, right? So when you think about like self-care is nurturing, it's sustainable.
Okay.
You can keep it going over time.
Okay.
Now what happens when it comes self-indulgent is when you start thinking, well, if I make more money, it's going to make me feel better.
Yeah. If I get that job, if I get that husband,
if I do this, that, and so what we call that is a double bind because it creates an unrealistic expectation. It's saying if this one thing happens, then you will ultimately experience either happiness or whatever you're looking for. The if and then scenario.
Yes.
And what we call that is a cognitive distortion, and that's what we start dealing with self-indulgence.
Okay.
Because you start pouring into that if then scenario.
You're right, Rossina,
right?
You're right.
And so you do it way more than what you actually need. And you're kind of overfilling your bucket, but it's because ego's behind it.
You're so right, Rossina. Okay, when we come back, you're so right. We're going to talk about COVID and how social distancing has really held a lot of us back right now. So we'll be back, everybody. Kathie J. Oakwood Homes is an official partner of the Kathie J Show. Oakwood Homes, building happiness. Rossina comes along. We all have questions for her during the commercial break. Welcome back to the Kathie J Show, everybody. On this show, we like to talk about living life to its fullest and how you rediscover hope and how you find happiness in life. Yes. My guest today is counselor and founder of Therapist of Color Collaborative at therapistofcolor.com. This is Rossina. Yay! You're amazing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kathie.
Okay, so let's get into this. So the pandemic. took a hit on a lot of us. Okay.
Absolutely.
And some of us are back in the swing of things, but it's not the normal it was. And then some of us haven't even come back out yet.
No.
So let's get into it. So people that are people that are coming to you with the concerns about about COVID and the pandemic, are they expressing that they feel lost? What are they coming with?
Yes, I mean, you have people experiencing, from being lost, not finding connection, that social anxiety, afraid to get back out. And, and we just can't forget grief and loss, because people have lost so much,
Yes.
whether it was employment, whether it was actual tangible loss of relatives, physical loss of, some people lost their homes.
Yeah.
Right. So lots of grief and loss. And so, it's impacted a lot of people in different ways. And we're all trying to figure out what it's going to look like when we come out of it, because we're still not through it. It's
No,
kind
we're
of
not.
it's kind of like this Cold War, right? It's just like, we know it's still here and it's still present, and we're still just trying to move through it day by day.
Yes. And so for the people that have the anxiety about COVID because of the waves that happen, and the CDC says this, and now we need masks indoors, and we're at this level, how do they cope with the waves that are coming their way?
Absolutely. I think everybody has to set their own baseline. You have to figure out what's comfortable for you.
Okay.
Right? And it's not gonna be the same for everybody. Now, the point where it becomes dysfunctional is when we're looking at those pillars of self-care, right?
Right.
And if you're isolating and you're not connecting, which pours into your social bucket,
Okay.
then you have to figure out a way to find connection, right? Because it goes into our most basic fundamental thing is to be connected to other humans.
Yeah, right. The human experience is connection and bonding.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so we desire and innately we need to be connected with others. We do not do anything in isolation and by ourselves. We're born by ourselves and we die by ourselves, but everything else in
We're
this
with
life
people.
we do with people.
Right. And if you find a hermit, he's a very angry person.
Yes, he is.
But you said that's why we need to be touched. Because it's part of our development is each other.
Yes. I mean, babies from utero learn to smile. And they learn to smile as an adaptive mechanism so that we pick them up and soothe them when they're
don't hurt them.
Absolutely.
Right. No, for sure it is.
And so
a survival mechanism.
And when they're not being touched, right, that very necessary thing, then they're not getting their neurons and electrons and all these things that are going towards our brain development. They're missing that.
That's crazy. Okay, so let's talk about the people with excuses. There's a lot of us, I have excuses as to why I can't fill this part of my bucket of my life, So what do you tell the people that come and sit with you that have excuses?
So when people have excuses, one part is if somebody's like, well, I never have to do that. And I'm like, well, okay, so how is it working out for you?
Yeah, right.
And most oftentimes people are like, well, it's not working so well. So then it goes to, well, maybe we need to take some action, right?
Okay, right.
We got to set an intention. We got to take some action because this way over here isn't working for you. And so it's sitting with it, and we work with a little bit of that dissonance sometimes because people aren't always ready to come into therapy.
No, for sure. I'm sure the first couple times it's them telling you everything that's wrong that's keeping them from being able to get well.
And we have to remind people there are things that are working well for you. So how do you build up your toolbox over here and the things that are working well for you that support and help you combat the things aren't working so well for you?
So the toolbox over here is the self-care.
Yes.
And so it's also things that you have to be aware of what triggers you, things that are said.
Yes.
There's certain fast food places I can't drive by anymore.
Yes, it's a
you
trigger.
have to be aware of that. It's a trigger.
Yeah.
Okay, so if COVID pulled us back so much, you say it also pulled us back so much that we forgot how to ask for help.
Yes.
Explain that.
Because what it did is when we were all in isolation in our own little bubbles,
it
was
our own little world.
We were all still trying to figure out how does Zoom work, how does Google Meet and all these other online platforms.
Right.
And we weren't even figuring out how we could use that to connect with others. So when it came to something going down in your home, well, the people you would call before to come over and ask you were no longer calling them to come over. So then you were figuring out, oh, well, I got to do this by myself. So then our inner superhuman kind of went into overload.
We figured out how to do it.
We started figuring out how to do it, and I'll do it by myself. I'll do it by myself. I'll do it by myself.
That's not always the answer.
That's not always the answer, because then when you're doing it by yourself all the time, and then the stressors, right, that we were talking about from the environment start building upon you, you don't always have the resources to meet every need that the environment is throwing at you.
No way. That's why we end up in road rage and stuff like that.
Precisely. And road rage really is just the built up emotions, not having the coping mechanisms to be on the road.
Deal with that person that doesn't know how to drive. Okay.
Right. And so,
but you said most of us are in a state of surviving and not thriving. And that's our whole problem.
Yes, because we're trying to just manage and mitigate all this stuff internally, and we're not asking for help. We're not having a conversation with somebody because somehow we're sparing them of our feelings and we're thinking somebody's taking it on.
Totally.
And it's none of that. It's just being in fellowship with people, just having somebody hold space with you just pours so much into your bucket. And so asking for help isn't always like, please help me, and making you feel weak.
It could be talking.
It could be talking and just being in the same space with each other.
All right. And you also, so it's not too late for any of us to recover.
Absolutely not. It's just intention, action, and being consistent.
Thank you so much, Rossina. All right. When we come back, getting better does take work. We've talked about it, and you can do it. Coming up, questions to ask yourself and your therapist. I love that. But first, everybody, it's time for this week's fun fact from the Colorado Lottery. Did you know GOCO was created when the Colorado voters approved a constitutional amendment back in 1992? We're in one of the only states that does it. Thanks to an amazing network of statewide partners, this covers nearly 3 decades of investments, $1.7 billion in conservation and recreation to the state of Colorado. Play on, people. Welcome back to the Kathie J Show. This whole half hour we've been talking with professional counselor. This is Rossina Schroeer-Santiago. She's also the founder of Therapists of Color Collaborative. Yay! Yes. We love that. So now we're going to ask about how do you know if you need professional help?
Absolutely.
There's some screeners that you have that people can go and go to, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So let's start with those. So the first one is we have Mental Health America. What do you do here?
So in the Mental Health America, they have a bunch of different screeners that you can use.
Okay.
And so a caveat with screeners, right? Screeners, when you're going to those websites and kind of taking those self-tests, they're only meant to give you perspective.
Okay.
Right? By no stretch of the means are they meant to substitute for any formal diagnosis or any actual care from a licensed professional.
So it's just to go take the test and maybe realize, because I did take some of the screener tests yesterday when you sent me the links, and I was like, I might have this problem.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize it. For just the questions alone.
Absolutely.
We're
so
making
just
me think.
Perspective to help people that are kind of on the fence and not sure if going into therapy is something that they're ready to do. It gives them perspective to say, maybe it is time for me to sit down on the couch and talk about it.
Okay, so Mental Health America, that's multiples.
Yes.
There's one, too, for the Veterans of America.
Yeah, and so the VA one has an excellent PTSD screener.
That's a good one.
And so and that one's not just for veterans. It's actually, you can use it just regular people like you and me.
Yes, any of us can get PTSD.
Any of us can get PTSD.
It comes on all different forms.
It's a great screener for that.
All right, and now the Centers for Disease Control also has one.
Absolutely, and that one was for kind of what facts do you know about mental health? Like, do you know when you're ready to go in and get mental health, and what do you actually know about mental health?
Okay, so that's a good one too.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get in. If I'm going in, I'm going to a therapist.
Yes.
You say that I can ask the therapist questions.
Yes, but please ask us questions.
What is a good one that I could ask you?
Yeah, so one good question is like, what qualities and characteristics do you have to support me in my journey?
I could ask you that?
Yes.
You're not going to just say, well, I'm educated.
No, because part of our disclosures when we're working with our clients is we have to tell you what our theoretical approach is.
Oh, okay.
So we have to tell you what we're going to be doing with you and like what our approach is, so you can figure out if I'm like the right therapist for you.
So like, what's your approach, and I would think everyone has the same approach.
No, we all have different. My approach is very humanistic and person-centered, which means I'm looking at you. I believe you all have all of the qualities and characteristics you need, and that I'm but a humble participant on your journey to support you.
And I love that,
right?
Because that is exactly what it's about, is we have to do the work.
Yes.
If you want to get better, you have to do the work, everybody.
Absolutely.
You're in the driver's seat of your own life,
yes.
Right? And I love how you say we're the longest relationship. How do you explain that?
Yeah, you, my dear, are the longest relationship you will ever have.
Yes. So be good to yourself.
Yes.
So if you need a therapist to help push you through, don't have any shame about it.
Nope.
Get the help you need.
Yes.
Also, it's about money. A lot of people say the money holds them back from
Yes,
therapy.
and that's another great question to ask your therapist.
Okay.
So when you're going into therapy, like, what are my options and how I can pay for my therapy with you?
I can ask therapists that.
Absolutely,
You guys have grants, sliding scales. How would you have money?
For our particular in the collaborative, we have several grants that we are able to offer, more specific towards BIPOC populations.
Okay.
We also have grants for those who've been victims of crime.
Oh, wow.
Right? And haven't gone through the typical victim services. And we also have grants in our partnership with Center for African American Health for those individuals who have income-based needs.
So, but more or less, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So, therapistofcolor.com is where you can find Rossina and those therapists. So, one more thing, though. Another thing is the therapist itself. It's so hard because you have to start a journey with them.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the beginning, we only have like 30 seconds left. I want you to just tell everybody why they need to find a therapist.
Yeah, a therapist is so important to just help you be with what is disrupting you in your life. If you're not feeling like you're connecting with people, if you're not having the experiences that you want to have, be okay with asking someone for help and let us be that place where you can talk about what's going on.
I love that. No judgment. Just
No
a humble
judgment.
witness helping you move through.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Rossina. Remember, you can find her at therapistofcolor.com. Everyone have a good day and be good to yourself.